Howdy everybody. Did you know that small farms and small backyard farms actually outproduce significantly larger farms? Follow me and I'll explain why. It's because small farms have to be efficient with their space. Large farms don't. And that basically is it. If you look at a small farm like the picture I'm showing you here, they have to account and try to make every square inch of their farm productive. Whereas a larger farm doesn't have to be concerned that much with making every square inch productive. And the smaller farms don't just outproduce larger farms by a little bit, they outproduce by a huge amount. And you may say, wow, that's something new, with permaculture and everything. No, it's not. It isn't actually. It's not something new at all. Back during the times of World War II, there was something called the Victory Garden Campaign. And that existed in Canada, existed in the UK, the United States, and some other countries. All encouraged their population to have victory gardens. And the ones in the United States, at least, produced 8 million tons of food. And these were little garden plots in the yards of people's homes. They say that it accounted for 40% of the food that was eaten during that time. But that is not an accurate percentage number because people were also eating meat and other things that weren't being grown in those little plots. So if you only consider the vegetable and maybe some fruit material, they produced a lot more than 40%. So the victory gardens were enormously successful. And I'm talking to you about this today because someone happened to mention to me a while back that permaculture is not scalable. Well, what he meant by that is that, permaculture works on a small plot of land, but it's not scalable to produce, and we need farms that can feed the world. Well, guess what? Those large farms actually don't feed the world. The smaller plots of land are what actually feeds the world. And the larger plots kind of act as a support system for that. It's exactly the opposite of what you've been taught. So I've stopped here just outside the greenhouse, and you'll notice that this is where the fence comes out from where the charger is. The charger is in that green box there. All of this is grown up around the fence here, and I'm going to have to cut this. It's kind of gotten away from us. This is one of the realities of being a farmer, is that things tend to get away from you sometimes. And you can't make a big deal out of it, you just have to take care of it. Okay, so I'm grabbing the scythe now. I'm just going to take my tool here, my stone, clean the burrs off the blade, and we're just going to take care of this job very quickly. Okay, so that job is done very quickly. What I wanted to continue talking about was this idea that permaculture is not scalable. And let's think for a minute what scalable means. Scalable means that you have something at a small scale that is working pretty well, and so now you're going to scale it up. You're going to make it bigger, produce more, and therefore make more money. That's the idea behind scaling up. And scaling up almost always involves industrialization. Here's Odeon chilling out. The dogs pretty much rest during the day. They're the most active during the night when they have to really protect the property from predators. Now, I'm not here to whine and complain about the evils of industrialization. Actually, industrialization consists of 2 steps. There's an invention, then that invention is scaled up. That's the whole scaling up idea. But industrialization almost always leads to long-term negative results when it's done in the absence of a strong ethical foundation. So if you don't have a strong ethical foundation to guide you, you're going to make all kinds of decisions that in the short term it's hugely beneficial. People make a lot of money and what have you, but in the long term, there's huge, enormous consequences. And those consequences almost always cost more money to mitigate than the money that was generated by the invention in the first place. So let me give you a quick example of that as I'm doing more of the cleaning of the fence here. Let me tell you a story about industrialization. In 1796, Eli Whitney, an American, filed a patent for the cotton gin, also known as the cotton engine. This was an invention that literally changed the entire landscape of farming in the southern United States. Because up to that time, the economy in the South was not very good. The crops that they were growing, tobacco, rice, and cotton, were not particularly profitable. And in the case of cotton, the processing cost of cotton was astronomical. And the reason why is because cotton has all these little seeds, and not just the seeds, but the coverings of the seeds that have to be pulled out before the cotton can be spun and be used. And so the processing was very tedious and very expensive. And so along comes this guy, Eli Whitney. Now, Eli Whitney actually wanted to be a lawyer, and he was working on a farm in Georgia over the summer to gain money to pay for law school. The owner of the farm complained and complained about the cotton and how much it cost to process it and how he wasn't making any money. And Eli Whitney was apparently pretty good with his hands, so he asked Eli Whitney if he could come up with something that could make the process better. And so Eli Whitney actually did. He invented the cotton gin. Well, that set into motion a whole group of unintended consequences. Now, if you look at the history books, Whitney thought that the cotton gin was actually going to spark the end of slavery in the South because they wouldn't need slaves to be picking all of those seeds through the cotton. It actually had exactly the opposite effect. And here's the reason why. And by the way, if you like this video, if it's useful for you, or if you just like it, please click the like button. That helps me a lot. And subscribe if you'd like to support the channel. Thanks. Demand for the cotton gin was extremely high, and so Whitney was able to charge a lot of money for each machine that he produced, and only the wealthiest farms were able to pay the price for the cotton gin. So they thrived and were able to outcompete the smaller farms, and they bought them out, and that's how you wound up with these large plantations in the South. It was largely because of the invention of the cotton gin. And that led to not less slavery, but more slavery, because now that they could process the cotton, they started planting a lot more cotton, and they needed more people to pick the cotton. So it actually made the situation orders of magnitude worse. On top of that, for Whitney, he spent pretty much the rest of his life involved in lawsuit after lawsuit after lawsuit of patent infringement. Because the machine was so expensive, people started copying it, and they actually made some improvements on it. So here are the sheepies. That's Junior and Sammy. Kathy is up there in the distance. Howdy there, Junior. You can see that we have a lot of clumping grass around here. We're hoping to get rid of that. Here's Junior. But right now the sheep seem to like the grass okay. Hi, Junior. Hi, Junior. But the problem with the clumping grass is that it has an allelopathic quality that it prevents other things from growing around it, and so you wind up with a whole farm full of clumping grass instead of a rich diversity. So we're digging up a lot of this clumping grass. So I think you could see how industrialization can lead to a lot of unforeseen consequences. And those unforeseen consequences, for the most part, can be avoided if there is a strong ethical foundation in the decision-making and how to scale it up in the first place. Unfortunately, in most cases, that strong ethical foundation doesn't exist. And so what happens? Investors get involved. Once industrialization starts, investors get involved. And those investors want to see a return on their investment. That's fair. But they don't want to wait a long time to get it either. So that puts pressure for quick results. And when you have pressure for quick results, you tend to cut corners. You wind up with pollution problems and other environmental problems that could have been avoided if that strong ethical foundation had been in place and said, no, we could do this, but we're not going to do it because it's going to have this effect. And by the way, slavery is a perfect example of what happens when we operate without a strong ethical foundation under what we're doing and guiding our decision making. So the question then becomes, is it possible to scale up without all those consequences? And yes, it is. There actually are permaculture farms, very large farms. Gabe Brown up in North Dakota has 5,000 acres. Greg Judy, a sheep farmer, has, last count he has 11 or 12 pieces of land that he either owns or leases that he raises sheep and cattle on. Joel Salatin has a huge operation up in Virginia. He makes ethical decisions. He works with nature instead of against it. And that is what the permaculture movement has been about.